We start today with some unfortunate news out of the White House. President Biden has issued a warning to Israel. Change some of your key policies in Gaza, or the U.S. may reevaluate its support. The president is also demanding an immediate ceasefire deal.
At the same time, Biden harshly criticized Israel for the airstrike that accidentally killed 7 aid workers, even though his own administration was responsible for a similar tragedy in the pullout from Afghanistan. Chris Mitchell brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Israel moved to get more aid into Gaza by opening up a key port and a crossing into northern Gaza. This comes after President Biden told Prime Minister Netanyahu that U.S. policy toward Israel will change unless the Israeli military does more to protect aid workers and deals with the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
With respect to Gaza, we need to see certain changes. And if we don't, then we'll have to consider changes to our own policy. But it's not about leverage.
Biden also told Netanyahu he wants a ceasefire deal without delay.
He underscored as well that an immediate ceasefire is essential to stabilize and improve the humanitarian situation and protect innocent civilians, and he urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to empower his negotiators to conclude a deal without delay.
But there are still big differences between Israel and Hamas, as Hamas wants the war to end immediately, with a complete Israeli pullout from Gaza. So some argue a ceasefire could mean losing the war. Jeff Balaban, who leads the American Center for Law and Justice's Israel operations from Jerusalem, told CBN News a ceasefire would have dire consequences for Israel.
The implications for that is that America has now completely become Israel's tactical enemy. In real terms, in practical terms, this is impossible. That is demanding that Israel lose this war. Israel cannot afford to lose this war. This is an existential war.
Netanyahu also maintains Israel must win its war against terrorist forces for the sake of the U.S. and the rest of the West.
This is a larger battle. Our battle is your battle. Our victory is your victory. And if we don't have a victory, this will have enormous implications for American security, for our common future. So we must win.
In his call with Netanyahu, Biden expressed outrage over Israel's accidentally killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza on Monday. But American conservatives point out the U.S. also killed civilians with the drone strike during Biden's chaotic pullout from Afghanistan in 2021.
I am now convinced that as many as 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, were tragically killed in that strike.
Meanwhile, Blinken is taking heat for suggesting Israel could become like Hamas if it doesn't do more to reverence life in Gaza.
That's our strength. It's what distinguishes us from terrorists like Hamas. If we lose that reverence for human life, we risk becoming indistinguishable from those we confront.
The latest disagreement between the White House and Israel comes as Israelis from all political viewpoints increasingly believe their country stands alone in the world. Yet despite their political divisions, Israelis agree Hamas must be destroyed. Balaban says many in Israel are turning to God.
They feel 100% resolute. There is, of course, we've seen this since the beginning of the war, turning to God. We see people who say things like, I'm not sure I'm a believer, or I've never been a believer, but I'm keeping Shabbat. Or I'm not sure I'm a believer, but I'm going to say the Shema prayer, or I'm going to wear tzitzit, because that's what unifies the Jewish people.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, may that unity stand in Israel, and I just want the Israeli people to know we stand with you. We understand the crisis you're in. We understand that you can't have a unilateral ceasefire because that is not ever a ceasefire. Hamas is vowing to repeat October 7 again and again and again. There's no ceasefire language in that. There's no peace in that. You have to defeat Hamas, and you have to do it decisively. The West needs to understand that, and we understand it. I understand it, and we stand with you. May the prayer of Jehoshaphat, I'm going back to 2 Chronicles chapter 20, may the prayer of Jehoshaphat be your prayer, that praise the Lord, hallelujah, his mercy endures forever. That's what they sang as they went into battle And in that, God sent confusion to the enemy, and he won the war for them. We stand with you because we know that God is going to honor his promises and his covenant with the Jewish people. He made a covenant with Abraham. He made it with Isaac. He made it with Jacob. He called Jacob Israel, and that covenant stands today. Any kind of unilateral ceasefire where Israel says we're going to stop the war and we're going to stop trying to pursue Hamas just gives Hamas the victory. And everything that's happening now from the U.S. government is reassuring Hamas, all you have to do is wait. We are going to come to your aid. At the end of this, you're still going to be in charge of Gaza. That's a message we should never send to a terrorist group. If you've labeled them a terrorist group, hold to it and insist that they unconditionally surrender and that they release all the hostages. And I remind the White House, there are American hostages right now in the hands of Hamas. You should be dedicated to freeing your own citizens. So let the White House know, let your congressman know, let your senator know. You stand with Israel, and you expect them to do that as well. In other news, we are all feeling the impact of the rising tensions in the Middle East at the gas pump. Ephraim Graham has that story and more from the CBN Newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, international oil prices hit their highest levels since October, with the global benchmark Brent crude oil rising to more than $90 Thursday. Oil prices have been climbing this year with concerns about the situation in the Middle East. Analysts say this increase in energy prices could lead to more worries about inflation, which could mean it will be longer until the federal cuts interest rates. Meanwhile, today's unemployment numbers for March came in at 3.8%, with job growth higher than expected. This could slow down the Fed's plans to cut rates. Despite those job numbers, layoffs are on the way at some fast food restaurants in California, with the state's new minimum wage hike from $16 to $20 an hour for many of those locations beginning this week. Some owners are cutting costs to make up for the new expense by letting some employees go and raising prices. CBN's Brody Carter has that story.
Since Monday, April 1st, fast food workers at some major large chains have seen a jump in their hourly pay. It aims to provide a living wage for these workers in California, a state known for its high cost of living. But owners worry it'll cost them business.
El aumento de $20, la verdad que es algo genial. Yo hubiera querido que hace años hubiera pasado esto.
Fast food workers say a pay bump is long overdue.
I can take maybe a day off and be with my family or do something with my daughter, which I haven't done in a long time.
But for owners, the higher cost is hard to swallow.
2024 has been a tough year to date. We have soft sales, we have declining traffic counts. So for a business owner, I mean, that's the worst time to have to raise prices. But I see it as a necessity to comply with this law and then also stay in business.
Alex Johnson owns 10 Auntie Anne's and Cinnabon stores in California. He expects roughly $500,000 in increased operational costs spread across these stores and worries it could do him in for good.
We're no longer hiring. We're not backfilling positions. We're not growing in the state anymore. We're not expanding more locations. And I'm ultimately thinking about selling or closing my business.
The pressure is being felt statewide. Like most fast food restaurants, Carrie Harper Howie, who manages 21 McDonald's locations, has passed on that cost to their customers, and she worries how those higher prices will be received.
Everyone is not going to be able to afford even the measured and carefully thought out price changes that we are going to be implementing.
And some restaurants are dealing with laying people off, cutting back on workers' hours, and eventually some will likely replace part of their workforce with artificial intelligence or robots. Brody Carter, CBN News.
I want to turn now to politics. For more than 40 years, evangelical voters have tended to favor conservative Republican candidates. Donald Trump gained the support of about 80% of white evangelicals in the last two elections. CBN chief political analyst David Brody brings us this look at how this coalition developed and the key issues in this year's election.
Defining the evangelical voter has always been a challenge, and nowadays it's become even more complicated. Former GOP nominee for president Mike Huckabee says evangelicals don't just fit into one box anymore.
I get so tired of hearing particularly this line. Well, evangelicals are all, and then fill in the blank. Evangelicals are not all anything. Evangelicals are people with a lot of different views.
Huckabee knows the playing field because when he first ran for president in 2008, his more populist tone resonated with evangelicals.
Bless our president, Donald Trump.
Long before Donald Trump came along.
I was talking about working class issues. And at that time, it was a little bit too soon for the Republican Party to hear it.
Fast forward to 2024, and headlines such as Trump has transformed evangelicals and is connecting with a different type of evangelical highlight the change. Those result from the former president's appeal to those who might not attend church regularly and are seen as anti-establishment and anti-elitist. Chad Connolly leads the Get Out the Vote organization, Faith Wins.
I think it's fair that he's brought out a whole different segment of voters that have been really missing.
And that includes evangelicals.
Absolutely includes evangelicals.
A growing distrust of the federal government has helped drive this change. In 2017, 31% of white evangelical Protestants expressed trust in the government. Today, the number has dropped more than half to 15%. Perhaps a more telling shift is the standard on personal morality of a candidate. More than a decade ago, 30% of white evangelicals believed an elected official could commit personal immoral acts and still be ethical in their public life. That number has now skyrocketed to 72%. Then there's the contrast in education. Exit polls in this year's GOP primaries show that while Trump split the college-educated evangelical vote, he wins more than 2/3 of those who didn't go to college.
We heard during the Obama years that the left wouldn't go visit in the areas in Pennsylvania that were coal mining areas, that were just blue collar, go to work, flag waving, God fearing, but might have a beer on a Friday afternoon kind of thing and go to church once a month. I do think that Trump has brought those people out.
Many of those voters are likely former Democrats or independents who have added a new layer to the evangelical column. They're also seen as leaning toward Trump on issues like illegal immigration, economic uncertainty, and that lack of trust in the federal government.
There's something going on in the country.
What he says makes sense, and it makes sense to the hardworking people of America.
Connolly's group is planning a Common Sense America tour, which stops at churches nationwide. Instead of the usual church conference focusing on areas such as life and marriage, this tour will be broader, touching on issues deeply affecting the church.
David, I've been in 11 states this year. Not a single one hasn't been affected by the drug trafficking, the fentanyl. I've had churches who had deacons or members or tithers or people who really involved in their church, Sunday school teachers who've lost kids to this fentanyl poisoning stuff, or even people in their family and community, and the churches are the backstop. So I just think this populist movement is because people are fed up with what's going on, and you don't have to be a Christian to see it.
David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Elections coming quicker than we realize. Gordon?
Well, I can't get here soon enough. The stage is certainly set, and if you're not registered to vote, please get registered to vote. And don't just focus on the presidential election. There are a lot of what are called down ballot races that absolutely determine the tenor of the country and our path going forward. You can have a very serious argument that our government today is broken, and Democrats and Republicans can't come together and pass any kind of legislation, let alone comprehensive legislation on pressing issues like immigration. They just can't seem to ever get it done. But I've been around politics for a very long time, and if you think that Christian voters are somehow monolithic, no, they're not. And each one makes up their own mind of how to vote, and that has been my experience through the decades. Number one issues tend to be pocketbook and, you know, how's the economy doing? And Reagan's famous phrase, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Those tend to drive things like nothing else. But these days, we have a new phenomenon where people think the government is against you, that the government is trying to enforce some kind of ideology that disagrees with your fundamental faith, that's a game changer for the American republic. When you start thinking government is out to get you, and whether that's what you see as the police descend in SWAT teams, or you have this sense you're being constantly surveilled, or I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. No, you're not. These are very serious issues that we're facing, and to divide it based on are you evangelical or not evangelical, I think both parties need to wake up. If the American people, as a majority, think their own government is working against them, well, then government has to change.